Nick Stumphauzer, Part 5.
That's good. And this time I didn't need to make a Frankenstein of your voice to do it.
I have no idea how you did that.
I've also made a few strange phone calls using your voice to other people.
That's a little disconcerting there, David.
I blame the Electric Universe.
Oh no, here we go.
So no, I just wanted to sort of try to undermine your faith in this silly worldview, but maybe just talk a little bit about who you are, what you believe, and why you believe it. No, no, but what is it with this Electric Universe? You wanted to just sort of talk about the metaphysics of your belief, please.
Sure. So the Electric Universe is an alternate cosmology. It's a cosmology based on electrical mechanics and plasma physics that argues that electricity rules the universe, that gravity is a very weak force that is beholden to electricity, and that one of the things that happens when you allow for this is that planets can get very close to each other, and that when they do get close to each other, they discharge electricity between each other, and this plasma discharge phenomena takes certain shapes. And in doing forensic analysis of cultures around the world, we have found petroglyphs and carvings and drawings of these various thunderbolts, which substantiate the idea that these events were happening in the sky in human memory. And this is the birth of the myths, of the religions of the Greek and the Roman, and even the monotheistic lore that is what we read in the books today. And at first it was just to me a fascinating cosmology, and it still is, but I've now find it very difficult to take religion seriously, or at least give it the same weight as I used to before I knew about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in all of that, you talked about natural science, but you didn't talk about metaphysics, like first things. So what do you have to say? What have you learned from the Electric Universe model?
Yeah, pretty much nothing. So, it is strictly a cosmology. It does not propose a beginning to the universe. It does deny the Big Bang happened. It denies redshift as a plausible evidence for some Big Bang. It thinks that black holes are nonsense, that time cannot be stretched and squeezed, like clay, just all this stuff is nonsense. But it doesn't talk about heaven or hell or first things. One of the questions that I asked the guy who wrote the book on this is, why is the universe not homogeneous? If the Electric Universe posits that these forces are all working to rectify one stress over here and another stress over there, then how come the entire universe isn't homogeneous? What was the first stressor? And so there are still plenty of things that are not answered by this. And I think I've told you over messages before that my intuition is that there is a deity and that there is an intelligence and a consciousness to this universe that is supernatural, as in above natural. And so I don't think that the Electric Universe, is grounds for atheism or naturalism. Actually, I think it's quite the opposite. But what I take issue with now, in light of what I understand, is just this notion that that religions, whether it's the Greek and the Roman religions of the gods of Olympus, or even the monotheistic religions and these stories there, that they can't be seen in the same light of, oh, this is a historical event that was seen and passed down. Rather, this is a misinterpretation or the inability to interpret catastrophic doomsday cosmological events that happened on Earth in man's memory. And then when they stopped, when the planets entered the orbit that we see them now today, our inability to see what the people who originally saw them is what gave rise to our attempt at understanding them, which is the religions and the gods and the stories.
I bounced that idea off you on Facebook about the three worldviews being monism, monotheism, or nihilism. Did you want to just talk a little bit about what I was proposing, how you understood it, and where you think you might fall, and if it had any utility for you at all as a metaphysical diagnosis?
I wasn't super impressed by that, just because my response to you was, where does atheism or agnosticism, fall into this? And I think I still consider myself a pretty strong agnostic in that. I think that there's so much that is possible that I'm sort of in a state of superposition. I think that I've grown to appreciate just how dogmatic and unreasonable hard atheism is, which I guess is, massive progress from where I was when you and I first started talking. But I think that the idea of, panpsychism or pantheism as opposed to hard monotheism is more intuitive and appealing to me in terms of what I've experienced personally, and then the sort of the research that I've done. The idea of, the universe itself being conscious, being the consciousness, that we are all sort of segments of a large fabric that is conscious and has information, and that this information manifests itself throughout the universe in various forms. I think that it explains, how evolution works, because this idea of neo-Darwinism, I think, is as nonsensical as creationism, and I've really given both a fair shake.
But if God is all there is, then basically heaven awaits all of us, because we are suffering from a separation illusion, and we're going to go back to the source, and we're just going to enjoy being that one God. And the definition of heaven is just being with God, enjoying God's presence. And if all separation is illusion, which I think every pantheist, every monist, every panpsychist should come to that conclusion, that separation is illusion, and that the ultimate reality is God, and therefore heaven. So it's a good outcome. There's literally nothing to worry about. We just have to enjoy the illusion, the show, right? Are you comfortable with that?
I think if panpsychism is true, or any permutation of that, then there is only the illusion of separation. That makes perfect sense to me. And then life is just the symphony of illusions until ostensibly death, rips the veil apart, and we once again become one with existence itself, without separation. And I think from, what I understand about psychedelics and what little I've experienced with them, that maybe they give you a peek behind the veil pre-death. You get to die without dying, and then you once again return to the illusion. And I think that's where Aldous Huxley would agree that with the doors of perception, that the brain is a reducing valve, that it is what stops down this flood of experience from being itself, and that psychedelics remove that valve, and it's just total immersion in being. So yeah, that would make sense to me.
But the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that it's good news. You can jump up and down and celebrate and laugh and dance and sing, but I don't see you doing that. So I don't think you buy it.
Well, I personally find existence to be absolutely terrifying. I just read something recently. Terence McKenna, he was a psychonaut. He took every psychedelic under the sun for decades and decades, and in the last few years of his life, the mushrooms turned on him, and he saw what you and I saw that one time, with the void, and he just kind of was left babbling, saying, it's all meaningless. There is nothing. There is nothing and no meaning. And that scares the shit out of me. I know exactly what he means of staring into that void. And I imagine that is what hell is, that true hell is conscious non-existence, that you are aware of your own annihilation, and it's just endless annihilation, endless separation. If God is being, right, if he is the being whose essence is existence, then hell is annihilation, and being aware of that annihilation, if that's even possible. And so that's that definitely makes me even more wary of psychedelics, but also, maybe that kind of gives you an insight that these drugs can either show you heaven, they can show you God and being itself, or they can show you hell, which is non-being.
Yeah. And so on the other end of the spectrum, from the joys of pantheism, where there's just God and heaven, you've got nihilism, where you are falling into that non-being and that non-existence. You're aware of your own annihilation. And in between those two, in my little diagnostic tool, I put monotheism, where we have both God and not God. And it really is the best of both worlds. And I like to joke that there are true pantheists, true monists, but it's only the monotheist that gets to experience true monism or true pantheism, because the monotheist is destined to be united with God and to participate more and more and ever more in the life of God, the mysterious triune life of God. So I am destined, if I play my cards right, to be experiencing more and more this sort of monism, which is being sold here on earth by Satan and his demons to gullible fools who say, yeah, it sounds good. I mean, there's only God, there's only heaven, and everything's alive, and being is, and separation is illusion. And so it sounds good. So they buy into it, and then they're left, sadly, with nihilism at the end. When they die, and or if they take enough drugs, they'll end up realizing that they are not united with God. They are not actually God, because they didn't make a choice to return God's love. And so they're falling into nothingness. This is my model of the three worldviews. If you choose monism, then you get nihilism. And if you choose nihilism, ironically, I think you fall straight into monotheism, because it's so terrifying being a nihilist that I think you will run straight into the arms of the God of monotheism. Only God exists. We are nothing. We are creatures. We are nothing. We're radically contingent. But if we make a choice to accept the free offer of salvation that was offered to us by Jesus Christ on the cross, we can go to heaven, we can be with God, and we'll be united with him. And so in a sense, monism is true once we get to heaven. But here on earth, it's an illusion. It's a lie. Does that help you understand my model?
I think a little bit. The idea that there is both God and not God is obviously very different than pantheism, which is to say that there is only God and separation is illusion. And I think the idea that there is God and not God is that sort of that dichotomy, that binary way of being, of nature, of reality. It's very old. It's very classical. It makes sense. It's intuitive that there are the yin and the yang, the two sides of the same coin. That would not surprise me if that were the case. I just think right now that's kind of where I'm at, that there is sort of this pantheism makes sense. Because the reason why is because that, if there is a God, that means that we are not God. That means we are separate from God, that we are not consubstantial. And so as a result, we have to, we are made in the image, we are not made of the substance. And so that separation to me isn't intuitive, because just like I said, because of what I've experienced and sort of what I'm looking into. So I think in order for me to make that move from pantheism to monotheism, it would just be a very simple thing of me sort of being able to intuit or understand the fact that I am not consubstantial with God.
That is actually what motivated my solipsism, is the fact that it is absurd to posit not God and to believe in not God. Even to this day, it boggles my mind much more than the existence of an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing God. What boggles my mind is, a grasshopper or a cute little kitten or my wife. Like these creatures are like mind-boggling. Like
interesting.
How can anything not be God? It is mind-boggling. So I do understand your perspective and why you don't think it's intuitive at all to be a monotheist. And I just have to reassure you that you're absolutely right. It is not intuitive. It is the most wonderful and bizarre and counterintuitive and absurd belief. But it's what I've come to believe, and it's what I hope you will come to believe, because I don't think you can be happy where you are. I don't think you are happy where you are. We both know that nihilism is not going to bring you any happiness. And if you have any happiness now in panpsychism, I don't think it's a true happiness or a true joy. I think it's a false joy. And I think that hunger remains, that void, that God-shaped hole in your heart remains, and it's aching and it's crying out. Maybe not 24/7, but certainly in those dark and quiet times, I think you'll notice that it's still there. Whereas since my conversion to monotheism, I don't have that anymore. So I'm a living, breathing example to you that monotheism is better. Now you can take that or you can leave it. But I'm telling you, I'm much, much happier.
Yeah, and I think I'm not struggling like I was pre-episode 12 of my podcast. When I kind of let that burden down, I'm not at peace in that I don't have like this, sense of consolation, or I figured it out, or I know how to orient myself in the universe or anything like that. But I have a much a calmer approach to this than this sort of neurotic, anxious, obsessive compulsive approach that I've been having. And I think just becoming okay with not knowing was really big for me. And I don't have the same sense of urgency to like find God. And I'm not sure why, because the stakes are still the same. Nothing has really changed. I think it's sort of just a mindset shift. But in terms of whether or not I can actually be, happy and fulfilled as a pantheist, I'm not sure. I doubt it. It doesn't, it's not super enticing. But then again, I'm also a very prideful person, and I think it would be hard for me to be subservient to God, because I think so highly of myself, and I really haven't experienced the glory and the wonder of God. When people describe, the ancient philosophers describe, and Anselm described God as, that which no greater can be imagined. Maybe it's all this study and my, I'm not reading the right sources, but so far God doesn't seem that extraordinary to me. I feel like I've put him in a box with all this studying. I feel like I've been able to stuff God in a jar and set him on the shelf as a specimen and say, okay, maybe there's something in this jar, maybe there's not, but it all fits in this jar. And so to me, I feel much greater than anything that could fit in this jar of my comprehension. Okay, so it creates the universe, but big deal. I can't create a universe, but it doesn't really, it doesn't knock my socks off. And so I think in order for me to be a happy monotheist, God would have to really blow my mind. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Pride is the major impediment to faith, and I seriously doubt that you have more pride than I do. I've never been impressed with anyone. I've never looked up to anyone ever until I discovered God and his saints. And now I can honestly say that I look up to another human being, and it's the saints. It's God's saints. And I certainly look up to God because I was confronted with the reality of how good he is. Not only how good he is, but how humble he is. This is a key thing that you might want to focus on. It's not that God's going to impress you with his greatness. He's going to impress you with his littleness, with how low he can stoop, with how he can serve you. Because you don't want to serve God. Well, that's fine. God will serve you. And then you'll have a tear in your eye, a tear of appreciation and bewilderment. How, God, are you serving me? This, until you reach that point, yeah, you keep him on that little jar on your shelf. That's fine. That's where he belongs.
Yeah, I mean, if there is this Catholic God or the God of Abraham and Isaac, I've got a lot to learn about him. I guess I really haven't encountered him. And something that I've realized recently too, that I kind of talked about a bit in episode 12, is that I never really had a relationship with God. What I had as a child and as a young teenager was very dogmatic and ignorant. And it was really just an attempt for me to impress my mom. It was to impress my peers, to impress the priest at my school. It was, look how good I can be. Look how good of a Catholic boy I can be. And I know all the theology and whatnot, but I didn't have a relationship. I feel like right now I have more of a relationship with a God that I don't believe in than I did with the God that I did believe in.
Is that my God, or is that the supernatural deity?
My intuition says it's your God.
Oh. Speaking of my God and a personal relationship, I mean, this interview is about you, but our dear friend Matthew Murdoch had an earth-shattering experience. Did he talk to you about it? And do you want to talk about what he might have experienced from your perspective?
I am going to be interviewing him for my podcast within the next couple of days. Actually, it struck me that after this interview, I might call him up and see if he's available. I'm fascinated by what he has allegedly experienced. I'm also very skeptical. I feel I'm not going to cut him any slack. Obviously, I'm happy for him, but he knows I'm an honest person, and that I'm going to probe him and really see, did he get a true experience, or is he sort of on the Jesus high? Going through high school, Catholic high school, we go on a retreat every year. And, I would always find these kids who, the cool kids in class who didn't give a damn about God and Jesus for 364 days of the year. And then the one day that we're on this retreat, they go to confession, and they got the praise and worship sessions, and they're they're crying and cheering and screaming, and they're elated. And then that high fades over the next couple of days. And so, I hope he finds the Shire, and I hope he has, and he said he has. He's told me that he has, and he's extremely excited to share his experience with me. So with my tongue slightly in cheek, I will be interviewing him soon.
He got back Sunday. I spoke to him on Tuesday night, and he said it's already fading. But I coached him to just try to massage his heart, to keep it vulnerable, keep it wounded, keep it bleeding, keep it open and raw and tender. That was my coaching to him. And that's easily said, and it's not easily done. Life does beat us up, and that's why we protect ourselves. That's why we harden our hearts. That's why we allow those scabs to grow over those wounds, because it hurts when you pull off the scab and the blood comes gushing out, right? But on the other hand, we want to pick at that scab. We want to know, are we alive? Are we a human? Like Pinocchio, I want to be a little boy. Well, it hurts to be a little boy. So, I want to ask you generally about this Prodigal podcast and the project generally. You started with a vision where it was going to be lights, cameras, action, the whole thing, interviews with celebrities. And then you've sort of come to a realization that, listen, this has to be a very serious project with an intellectual discussion, exploration, and it's more suited to the podcast. And then the tension between one extreme and the other, like young earth creationism on one hand, and then evolutionists like Aaron Ra on the other hand, you sort of stretched your elastic to the breaking point, and now you've got this slack sort of complacency where it's like, well, you know what, I don't really care. I've lost my drive and my passion for the question. Am I sketching your journey pretty accurately so far?
Close. I think I'm not as apathetic as I might appear. I think I still am interested. I think I'm just not as frantic in the way that I'm pursuing this. And somebody recently asked me, Nick, what is your vice? Everyone's got a vice. What's your vice? And I said, well, I don't drink coffee. I'm not addicted to coffee. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't smoke pot. I don't watch porn. I don't overeat. I don't really binge watch TV. Like, God, what do I do? And I realized, I compulsively research. That's my vice, is I will get grabbed by a topic or something. Usually it's either nutrition or theology, and I'll just dive into the rabbit hole. And my interest on something or another will kind of oscillate back and forth, and you can only go full bore for so long. And in terms of the Prodigal, you really start to realize how little you know the more you investigate. And in terms of evolution, specifically, just something like that, I can honestly say that I don't know enough, nor could I ever know enough to come up with a definitive answer. I think that, from what I understand, neo-Darwinism is about as silly as young earth creationism, and the Electric Universe, Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphogenic fields, the understanding of information outside of the genome, that the DNA is not what codes for things, that it's merely the factory floor. Like, these types of ideas kind of make this back and forth debate pretty obsolete. And so now I'm kind of enjoying the stroll through the marketplace of ideas, picking up some fruit and tasting it. Oh, this is an interesting idea. Wow, I've never seen this one over here before. All the while just acknowledging that I'm probably wrong on everything. I'm probably 100% wrong. And all I can really do is just enjoy the marketplace and hope that my intuition and my experience as I continue to live and move through life guides me to the right place. And the neuroticism and the frantic attempt at avoiding hell by thinking my way to God was just a recipe for disaster.
I want to ask you about the recruitment mentality in every club, whether it's an atheist club, whether it's a scientific club, whether it's the chess club. Every club wants more members, usually. How do you see it now with all this eager recruitment from a spiritual perspective, from a psychological perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you believe something, there's two reasons why you want other people to believe it. The first is because you want to show them how smart you are and impressive that you have obtained the truth. And so, when you share it with them and you say, come look over here, look what I have found, look what I have, there is a big ego bump to that. And then there's also the validation of, if these people whose opinions I care about believe the same thing that I believe, then I must be right. And that there's a very comforting and secure feeling when people join your ranks. Now I'm in a place where, I don't really have a camp. The agnostic camp that I am in, I don't know if you've ever seen The Big Lebowski, but we're just a bunch of, guys like, hey man, don't pee on my rug. We're just like, this is some interesting stuff. We'll just talk about while sipping White Russians. So I don't have a club now, and I think that's healthy for me, because I'm so prone to joining cults. God damn, I join cults so quick, and then I go yell from the rooftops that this is the right cult and everyone should be in it. It's probably my biggest character flaw is this serial monogamy with various intellectual cults. So yeah, I think it's very healthy for me to be in a place now where there's nobody has a t-shirt or an armband or anything like that. And we're just calmly perusing.
Random question. Do you get eligible young ladies coming forward because of your podcast saying, hey, you're cute, let's get married?
I have very few listeners in general. I think my most listened to podcast was the one that I did with Michael Jones, and it's got like 700 or 800 listens on it because he shared it. But primarily, I have very, very few people listening, and the handful of people who do listen to my podcast, the women that I know, I think are all in a relationship. And any women who are secret admirers of mine are very secret.
I was talking about recruiting, right? Well, time to get recruiting.
I just got all the cult leaders in history have done a really good job with the women. So I just got to start a cult and then I'll be all set.
Get yourself a white robe. I think it helps.
Yeah, I agree.
So can you remind me what we were just talking about before all the girl stuff?
The psychology of people.
Recruiting. Oh, yeah. I wanted to mention to you, you have a very pessimistic and cynical view of humanity, obviously, because it never occurred to you that someone would want to share the truth and that they would want their brothers and sisters to enjoy the truth, right? Like, I think of Plato's cave, the analogy of the cave. If I'm chained to that cave wall and I'm looking at the shadows with you, and for whatever reason I'm tapped on the shoulder and I'm allowed to go out into the sunshine and play, you're damn tootin', I'm going to come back in and I'm going to say, hey, Nick, what you think is the fullness of a fun and fulfilling life, come with me. Let's go up this narrow, craggy path and follow the light outdoors where the air is fresh and clean. This is a natural thing. We want the best for each other.
That is true. That does happen sometimes. I personally will share, if I really care about somebody, I'll let them know, hey, here's a way of existing that I think might serve you better. If somebody has a nutritional habit and they're really suffering as a result of it, and I just know that they have no idea, the causes of their suffering, I might be like, oh, hey, did you know X, Y, and Z? This might make your life better. But something that I'm learning more and more is that I don't owe anyone anything. And this notion of me trying to save everybody and go preach from the rooftops of all these wonderful things that I've learned, it really isn't the best way to go. In fact, that very few people are receptive. And so maybe I do have a pessimistic view, but I have rarely run across people who, out of true love and desire for my own happiness and well-being, have said, hey, I'd like to show you something. I'd like to tell you something. It's usually out of a place of self-aggrandizement, of ego, or of the delighting in showing that I am wrong about something. So maybe I just need better friends.
Yeah, we all do. But you mentioned earlier about your two sort of go-to obsessions being nutrition or diet and theology or religion or whatever it is. It just occurred to me that if I could possibly get you hooked on a research project that combines both, maybe this would be like the mother of all obsessions, and it might benefit you. And so this is the scientifically confirmed miracles of the Eucharist. If you want to look into that, I'm not pressuring you, but if it ever occurs to you that you get the itch to look into it, because it does involve true food and true drink, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and it does involve God and religions. So you can look into it. You can see atheist doctors that are giving full reports of these miracles, and they say that it's not natural. There's no possible natural explanation for these Eucharistic miracles, and there's a consistency across the approved miracles. I want you to research the approved ones, the ones that are approved, like the miracle at Lanciano and stuff like that. So how does that strike you? Are you tempted and tantalized even in the slightest?
I am squeamish and fearful. What's the other word? Protecting my ego from looking at those. I've been introduced to those in the past. It's one of my Catholic compatriots' favorite things to bring up, because if they know about them, they know that is a pretty damning thing to send me the URL to one of these and say, so checkmate atheist, what do you think of this? And for a long time, I got around it by showing all the ones that were BS and being like, well, these are all lies, therefore I don't have to address the one that you sent over. But I think the way that I would describe it is like, if there's a UFO, right, and then someone says, therefore aliens, well, they've kind of missed the point. It's an unidentified flying object, And in the case of this Eucharistic miracle, we don't have an explanation for A turning into B. Now, it's pretty convenient that in the confines of this story, this thing that everyone says is the body and blood of a guy happens to turn into body and blood. Like, I'm not going to be so pompous as to say, that's just, it could mean anything. No, it couldn't. It couldn't mean anything. Clearly, if this crazy thing is happening in the context of this story, it has to do with the story that everyone is talking about, which is, the Catholic or the Christian story. I don't have an explanation for it. I do find them interesting. I guess, let me ask you this. If I just said, I have no skepticism, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that yes, indeed, these hosts did turn into human flesh, how far does that really bring me? Well,
just saying that doesn't do anything, but you're a magician, right? You know about sleight of hand?
Mm-hmm.
So if I send you on a mission to like put your nose into a bunch of Catholic books talking about miracles, it's just to bathe you in Catholicism. I could care less what conclusion you come to. I just want you to be bathing in this. That's my approach with you.
Well, I would definitely be interested, more from the intellectual side. I'd be happy to seed the ground of your ulterior motives. That's fine by me. But yeah, I'd love to read into some of these. And by love to, I mean I will fearfully approach the topics that might absolutely undermine the ego that I've built to the world. But yeah, it's worth investigating.
I wanted to address this point with the egomania and the pride and all that. It is a very, 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 very common trick of Satan to make you think that you're going to lose something by submitting to God. And it's completely the opposite. You're going to have a more authentic sense of self, and you're going to be more you than you've ever been. We've talked about this before. It's the same thing in a romantic relationship. You could be with a million girls, but until you meet the one, you're just being inauthentic. And when you are with the one, she'll bring out your true self. We've talked about this many times, but I want to hammer it home with you, because when you meet the true God, you're going to be more yourself. It's not like you're going to be missing out on your ego. It's just going to dust off all the crap that's cluttering up your ego, and your ego can be free to sing and to dance and to peacock around as much as you want.
For sure. And whether or not I believe in a Satan, I think that it would make sense. It would follow logically that any God worth his salt would not cause a diminishing of his creatures for them knowing him. It would cause a celebration and a fulfillment of everything that they are. So I do just have to kind of get over that fear. However, with regards to the females, I don't believe in the one. I don't believe that there is one person. And so I think while I understand your analogy, I kind of reject this notion that there is one female set aside with whom I am, most fulfilled or whatever.
So just substitute, when I say one female, just say one harem.
Okay.
So very nice talking to you as always. I'd like you to end the show, and I'll leave it up to you what message you want to leave for the listeners today.
Just a few words. Do not go gentle into that good night.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.